Welcome to today's episode of Flow Meter Guy.
So when I got selected to go to my submarine, and we've been in competition since birth.
All right, well then, welcome to today's episode of Flow Meter Guy, where the currents of wit and wisdom flow as smoothly as the meters we discuss. Now, joining me today is a jolly old elf. No, he doesn't make toys for boys and girls, but he does make customized software for the test and bounce industry. So, young man, what is your name and what do you do?
My name is Hedrick. I am the owner of Ameritech Data Solutions. And like you said, we develop custom solutions for individuals that are trying to take and create a software that will solve a problem that they have. And so we do other industries besides test and balance, but test and balance does appear to be, at this time, our largest customer base.
Excellent, excellent. So the Flow Meter Guy production team today is on the road. We're in Hickory, North Carolina, at Derrick's facility here. And I hear Hickory, North Carolina got its name from a tavern. Do you know that story about that?
Well, yes and no. So Hickory actually, the actual history of Hickory is we're a large furniture manufacturer.
Furniture, is that what it was? Okay.
So ironically, Hickory was chosen because of the vast amount of furniture that North Carolina, and particularly this area, produced. Mm-hmm. Like for years and years and years, the National Furniture Shows were done in High Point, North Carolina. Now then, in the very recent years, they also do a second one in Las Vegas because it's the center of the universe for all things conference, right?
Yeah, sure.
But Hickory, if you take and you come into town from Highway 321, the welcome sign is two hickory leaves that introduce you or welcome you to our town.
That's great. That's great. And as Derrick has given us the tour, maybe we'll show you some pictures later on of your fabulous facility here that has everything from IT to gymnasium to bread products, legal facilities.
Yep.
And so it's quite a facility that you have here. You just kind of dominate all industries all under one roof. And then you said it's under perpetual reconstruction. You're always doing something a little bit different.
Yes. Yeah, so I'm trying to make the building as perfect as possible. So obviously it's an old warehouse built in 1931.
1931.
Yeah. And so comes with that is a lot of, shortcomings from today's standards or whatever. So when we bought the building, the people who had owned it prior to us we're going to put a bingo hall in here.
A bingo hall.
A bingo hall. And so they went ahead and they did the new electric, they did the new water, they did handicap accessible, all of those. The big ticket items they already had done, and then they went bankrupt. And so if anybody has ever built an actual house or bought a building and had to renovate it, those are the big ticket items.
Yeah, it's always a surprise.
It's always a surprise. So we bought it with basically the big infrastructure in place, and we've been adding to that. So we've divided it's an old warehouse, and we've divided the actual warehouse into rentable office spaces. So you mentioned earlier gymnasiums, attorneys, bread. So our dock area, we rent that to Pepperidge Farm bread distribution. So every day it smells like fresh baked bread in the building or whatever. And then we have an attorney's office who, ironically, when I bought the building, he was my closing attorney and for the building. And he said, I'm trying to find a space with some character in Hickory. Do you by chance know of any? I said, you do realize that I just bought a building. And he said, oh, are you going to rent space out of it? I said, yes. So he was my very first tenant. I literally had the building completely rented before I finally signed the contract.
What an investment. What an investment.
But we're always making improvements. I mean,
Yes, you are.
like one of the things is the parking lot that you parked in,
Yeah.
you couldn't get upstairs. So this is a 2-story building. We happen to be downstairs in my building. You couldn't get from the downstairs parking lot to the upstairs at all. So I had to put in concrete walks and steps up there and handrails, and we put in a new roof, and every single suite now has its own dedicated HVAC system so they can control their temperature.
That's quite a renovation. Quite a renovation.
Absolutely.
So, what does Derek do for a hobby in Hickory, North Carolina?
Well, I'm an avid cook.
Are you?
I love to cook. So on Sunday after church, I feed, anybody that wants to show up can come to my house and I will feed them Sunday lunch. I typically will feed anywhere from 6 to 8 people every Sunday. Sometimes I've had 10, sometimes I've had 4, but people are more than welcome to come to my house. I mean, the invitation is always open because people will say, well, I've been thinking about just stopping in. I said, absolutely, stop in, because the refrigerator is going to have food in it. I mean, all you have to do is open it up and decide what you want to eat.
We're not going to list his address at his house because Patty and I might stop by on this Sunday. We'll see what's going on. Well, that's excellent. That's excellent. So I've heard some rumors about your past.
Oh, goodness.
And although
This is
you're
one of those Diane Sawyer interviews,
you're a
isn't it?
successful businessman, but it wasn't always so. I heard rumors in the past that you really got started in the Navy, and then you had something to do as a nuclear chemist. Can you enlighten us a little bit about that?
So this is going to be one of those tearjerker stories. So I grew up dirt poor. Yep, dirt poor. So I grew up on a vegetable farm. And, when I grew up, we did not have meat every day. So now that most people will say, what are we going to have meat, and then what is going to go with it? For us, growing up on a vegetable farm, you had vegetables. And so my philosophy or my training or teaching was, okay, what kind of potatoes you're going to have, and then let's put something with that. And so,
really?
And my mother and father both worked in factory work. And so my younger brother is 10 years younger than I am. And so back then, when my parents went to work and I was out of school, my responsibility was take care of the baby and make sure supper was on the table when everybody came in. And so I grew up tending to an infant and making sure the house was clean and food was prepared so that when everybody got off of factory work, that they would have something to eat.
There you go. There you go.
I left there and said, okay, I can't afford to go to college. Even though I would have loved to go to culinary school, my grandmother said she would have paid for it, if I needed to. And I knew she didn't really have the money either. So I said, I'm just going to go to the Navy, and, because they'll pay for my education versus having to pay for education. And so I went in there and I took the ASVAB or whatever, which is a classification exam, and I passed it. And so I was selected to go to the nuclear power program. After I got selected for the nuclear power program, they had another opportunity. They said, hey, anybody want to take and test out to be a chemist? And I said, sure, I want to be a chemist. And so I tested out to be a chemist. And so I was the nuclear chemist on board a USS submarine.
A submarine?
SS 675 USS Bluefish.
That take a special ability to be tied up in a little can like that under the water?
Well, they do psych evals on you to make sure that you're psychologically able to take and be in submarine service. But I don't do anything simply. So let me explain to you where the complexity comes in. So back when I was going through the Navy, you had an opportunity to take and request brother duty. And so
What's that?
It is the opportunity for you to take and serve with your brother in the same unit. And that is allowed as long as you have one other male sibling available to take in that's not in the Navy or not in your unit. And that happened due to a family, all their children passed away. And so when I got selected to go to my submarine, I was selected for brother duty. And so 1 month before I was assigned to the submarine, my brother got promoted to supervisor. And so when I got on board and was on the submarine, he was my supervisor.
Oh,
now,
really?
he's my older brother. He's 5 years older than me, and we've been in competition since birth. And so it became very challenging from time to time working with him on the submarine. I mean, we would literally have to go into the reactor compartment
Really?
and have discussions about some of the things that he was requested to do. So I don't have the ability to do stupid stuff. So like, for example, I'm not one of those guys that go, dig a hole over here. Why am I digging a hole there? Because I said so. Now that doesn't work for me.
Yeah,
I need to know
why.
Need a purpose.
Uh-huh.
So that worked out. I mean, he eventually, moved to a different department, and so that all worked out pretty well. I did 6 years and got out.
Mm-hmm.
Back then, the Navy was paying people ridiculous money, 50, 60 grand as a one-time payment to re-enlist or whatever. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm getting out. And one of the primary reasons was because apparently I have a problem with authority.
Really?
That's
Not
what
you.
I've been told.
Oh,
And so,
some of your employees told me that.
yes, I'm sure. And so I got out and went on my own. And so I have, when I was starting out, it was difficult. And so I would tell my accountant from time to time, I'm quitting. I'm going to Walmart. I'm going to be a greeter. She says, no, you're not. And I said, what do you mean I'm not? And she said, you have a problem with authority. You couldn't do
Your
that.
accountant told you that, not the psychiatrist.
Not a
Okay, the
psychiatrist.
accountant. Okay.
I'm required to take and actually have my own job. So anyway, so I was a nuclear chemist on board a USS submarine.
So how did you turn that into an IT career?
So I'll try to make this portion shorter than the previous portion. So I got out of the Navy and I went to work for the environmental sciences side. So since I was already a chemist, I went to do environmental chemistry, and I got out in New Hampshire. And so I went to work for a small firm up there, and we tested groundwater, soil. We even tested moose and game, elk, and stuff like that. And the moose testing. And so those things there were to take and determine mercury in game because
really?
it's for food consumption. And so people would hunt moose and and other items up there. And so we would test it for the levels of mercury in it to make sure that just wild game in general was safe. We did trout and fish and things like that.
Wow.
I was on primarily the environmental side, so I was testing, soil and water and stuff like that. So while I was there, I determined that we had to do repetitive tasks over and over again. So we would take these samples and we would put them on a machine to test the actual components in it. And then I would sit down with a clipboard and I would write the numbers from the machine onto this clipboard. And then once I was done, I would sit down at a table, and there was a table about the size of this table here, and a bunch of chemists would sit down and they would do math, and it'd be like 142 times 1.8 times 100, and then 856 times 1.2 times 100, and it was just repetition. Like, this is ridiculous. And so I started with Lotus 123.
Lotus.
Lotus
All right.
123.
All right.
And that's how old I am. And I started writing these automation programs where I could just simply put in my numbers, and it would take and generate the result. And the first time I finished it and I submitted it, my supervisor said, what is this? And I said, I wrote a program to take and do the analysis, the results of this or whatever. And so I'm submitting my results or whatever. And he said, that's not allowed. You can't do that.
Why not?
And I said, why not?
Yeah.
And he said, well, that spreadsheet hasn't been validated. You need to get that validated by, the IT department and make sure that the formulas are right. And I said, well, let's do that. But I said, because I'm too lazy to sit at a table, and it's a waste of time to take and do the same thing over there. And so the IT looked at it and said, yeah, it works. It's a great idea. And so I started doing it, and other chemists would come to me and say, hey, can I have a copy of that? Can I use that?
Special program.
And so I'd say, sure, you can use it as well. And so it became the standard for reporting data in there. Well, I then moved down to North Carolina after my father passed away, so I'd be close to my mother and my younger brother. I moved far enough away that my mother couldn't show up without calling first. And then I would take and actually so the new company that I work for down here, I brought their spreadsheets as well. So this firm here also did soil and water, but they also did tobacco testing. They did food testing. They did pharmaceutical science testing all in one building. Well, if you've ever looked at the back of a product, there's nutritional labels.
Sure.
So I was on the team that helped develop the software to report that information to the actual federal government. And so when that big nutritional labeling piece came out, it wouldn't be anything for us to go into sample receiving and see bags of Burger King and bags of Hardee's and Bojangles and all these different food products that we would have to take and grind up to take and actually give you, the consumer, information on how many calories it is, how much fat is it.
So you break that down, you had analytical test equipment to do this.
That is correct. Okay. And so each one of those different tests, and then we would report that on this software and then submit that to the government, and so that they could take and then put it on those nutritional labels.
Wow.
I decided that I wanted to take and I became the IT guy at this company, and I was the senior research chemist, and then I was the IT guy because I wanted to do something else. And then I noticed that I wanted to go back to school because I'd never been to school. I wanted to go to school to see if I really knew what I knew or if I was just, thinking that I knew what I knew. And so I went to school, and so after the first semester, I ended up with a 4.0 average. And I'm like, yay, I do know what I'm talking about. And then the school approached me and said, hey, would you be willing to teach for us as well?
Really?
And I said, sure, of course, I'd love to teach for you. And so I started teaching for them. And then that led into me going, God, there's a bunch of people out there that really don't have any clue on this computer stuff and how it works. And so and I was teaching adult education at that time. And so some of the people who had small businesses would approach me afterwards and say, hey, can you help us? Can you come to our,
to our business?
And I said, sure, I can do that. And so I now am running a full-time job.
Right.
I'm teaching full-time.
Right.
And I'm actually helping customers on the side full-time. And I had a pager on my side and a beeper on my side, and
busy.
And things would go off, and I would take a break or go to lunch and do something and then come back or whatever. And finally, one point in time, I sat down and I'm like, I got to make a decision here. And I finally said, okay, I think I'm going to give up my full-time job with benefits and go out on my own and do everything on my own. And so I went to the president of the company and I said, I just want to let you know that I'm going to give you my notice, et cetera, et cetera. And he said, I expected it. He said, when you started coming in with a pager and a beaver and stuff like that, he said, I knew something was going on.
Something's going on.
And he said, not to worry. I want you to go out and do your own thing, but let you know that you always have a place here if you ever want to come back. And so, I thought that was very nice of him because he didn't have to say that, right? Yeah. And so I've been helping people ever since. One of my first customers, one of my first accountant, her husband was a test and balance guy, Henry Long. So Henry, those of you that have been in the business probably know Henry Long. And so his wife told me, said, hey, I need for you to take and help my husband out because he needs someone like you. And so she said, but you can't tell him that I sent you over there because if he knows that I sent you, he's going to send you away. So I
another wife-enabled program. Okay.
Exactly. I showed up unannounced and said, I hear that you have a firm and you need some help with something, whatever. And so he said yes. And about the time the phone rang, and he answered the phone, and apparently somebody had asked about the price on a proposal that he had created for them. And back then, you kept everything in just a spiral-bound notebook, you know. And so he's like, "Hold on a second," and he put the phone down, and he went over, and I see him looking one page, he's flipping back, and he's looking at another page, and he's flipping back. And so I stand there while I watch him do this, and he gets up and he walks back to the phone, picks it up, and says, "Is it job so-and-so, so-and-so?" And the guy said, "Yes." And he said, "Okay, the price is going to be so-and-so." And he hangs up the phone and he said, "You see that right there? I want you to develop me a program so I don't have to go do all that. I want to be able to take and find that price a lot quicker." And so we started developing the program, and that's where TabOps
TabOps is your program. So you mentioned Henry, and that business was called Test and Balance.
It was called Best.
Well, yeah, Henry, but the marketplace or the industry was Test and Balance.
Oh, Test and Balance. That is correct.
Tell us, what is Test and Balance, and why is a flow meter involved?
So Test and Balance, and so this is how I describe it to people that don't know. It is the quality control arm of the HVAC industry when it comes to new construction. So basically, an HVAC company will take and install an actual air conditioning system in a building. And then they were required to take and contract an independent third-party testing service to prove that the air conditioning system was installed correctly. Is the right amount of air coming out of each one of the ducts? Is the actual temperature correct in this side of the room and that side of the room? So they're the quality control unit for the actual HVAC system. And then the equipment that they use to do this are obviously flow meters. So they'll take and put a flow meter up to a duct, and that's what measures the actual air coming through there. And then they take those numbers and put them on our report forms and our software to report that back to either the general contractor, the mechanical contractor, or the owner, depending on who they're working with.
That's right. So to our audience, the HVAC where flow meters got involved, we needed to measure the air coming out of the ducts for the ceiling, and the chilled water is going through the chiller plant. And a bad analogy of the way an air conditioner works is like a radiator in your car. You run chilled water through a pipe and you blow air over it. And they need to monitor those two different independent items. Now, why do they need to log this data? Were there regulatory bodies that needed this information, or an organization?
Well, it's not necessarily, I mean, you could identify it as regulatory, or, but typically there were associations or groups of individuals that they wanted to take and create guidance so that one person's report would be identical to another person's report as for what they were presenting, et cetera, et cetera. So AABC, American Air Balance Council, Associated Air Balance Council, and ABC, NEBB, National Environmental Balancing Bureau, and then TABB, TAB, they are the big three organizations. And so they are groups that members can join, and what they do is they provide governing documentation to say you're going to test at this frequency, the specifications are going to take and be utilized to take and do it, and your instrumentation will be calibrated, and it'll be within this tolerance range, et cetera, et cetera. So what they did was they provided structure to the test and balance industry so that they would have a way to be able to take and say, I did it in accordance with this standard.
Gotcha.
And all of these standards really, their backbone is ASHRAE. So for any of those of you that are test and balance guys, all of these agencies and everything are their parent organization is ASHRAE. So
with that in mind, and can you, we're going to pull a screenshot up of a traditional picture of tab ops. Can you walk us through this picture, basically where the flow meter data goes in? So we have a screenshot of tab ops.
Yeah.
And tell us a little about how this works. Where's the data go from here to here?
Yeah. So tab ops, what we did was we took painstaking effort to take and make our program resemble and work like Excel. So as you can see on the screen, you see there are grids there, and moving your mouse around is very similar to an Excel. You can use arrow keys, you can use enter keys, or whatever. So basically what you would do from a firm is you would present to us your report forms. Usually they're going to be in Excel, and we would take and map them into our software. And then your forms on the screen would look just like the forms that you're currently using now. So you would simply just click on this actual column here where it says flow, and you would take and enter the reading from your flow meter directly onto the field. And then as you continue to enter readings in, you have the ability to take and sum those values to get a total airflow inside of there. So our software is really designed about efficiency.
So the old days was just clipboard information to write it down, and now it goes directly into your system.
Correct.
To record the system and generate a report.
Right.
For some other person to recognize and go on with there.
Yeah, so to kind of give you some background on this just a little bit, so technicians would usually take a clipboard and a piece of paper, and they would write the numbers on it or whatever, and they would take that piece of paper and they would give it to a secretary who would then take and type those numbers into a report sheet to be able to send off to the customer. Now, for those of you that are test and balance guys, you know that their handwriting is horrible. Absolutely horrible. Guys in the field do what's called as chicken scratch. And so it would not be uncommon for a secretary to have to take a look and go,
And interpret
is that
the data.
an 8
Yeah,
or a
yeah.
5? Is that a 9 or a 4? I mean, so having that ability to take and have them put the information directly into the system themselves,
Okay.
remove that additional burden from the office of having to contact the technician on a job site, pulling him off of what he's doing, wasting his time to go, hey, on that job you did last week, what's this number here? Is it a 2 or a 10?
So this
You know?
comes down to efficiencies, and then efficiencies mean revenue.
Correct.
It really comes down to. So contractors all about time.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, test and balance firms are a commodity service, right? All they have, their product is time. So if they can save time, they can make more money. And so our product is designed to take and allow them to be able to take and be more efficient. So therefore getting more done in the same amount of time or getting something done in a short amount of time, therefore giving them more profit.
So you have this one product that you like, and we talked about test and balance. Do you have other project management type tools then for other industries?
We do. So, like I mentioned in the very beginning, test and balance is our largest percent of revenue at this point in time. But we support other industries as well. So, one of the other primary industries we support is the municipalities, so wastewater treatment facilities. So, every city has a wastewater treatment plant. And so, what we do is we provide software for them to be able to collect their analytical results, and then those results then get published to the actual EPA, and then those EPA results get published on the national findings.
Right.
So basically, our software is utilized to take and help to report the actual waste that is being sent to them and cleaned up, and then that clean water is discharged back into the environment.
So in regards, having also a background in wastewater business for flow meters and whatnot, there's other software that control the facilities. Your objective is to collect the data, harvest the data,
Correct.
and then provide that again to regulatory bodies then.
Yeah, so we do have the ability to do some SCADA, which is the term for that automation.
Sure. So output from the analyzers,
Yeah,
or flow
absolutely.
meters and whatnot.
And so big things for you guys are going to be flow meters and closed piping, stuff like that. So you can do, ultrasonics on there to be able to take and measure that. So we collect that information as well, and then put that on our reports, because that information is necessary for the EPA to determine how much water and stuff is going out to
So
the actual.
you do that, and another notice that some of your presentations, you're talking more about data security.
We do. So I did actual software for years, and we had a group of our customers to, for lack of a better term, Shanghai me at a conference one time, and they said, we need to talk to you. And of course, when your customers come up to you, and they were our large customers, and when they come up to you and say, we need to talk to you, you're like, oh my God, and you guys have gained together. So what have I done?
What have you done?
And so we sat down, and so the one guy starts and says, look, you provide our software or whatever, and anytime we have to take and upgrade a computer or upgrade a software or something like that, we call you and say, hey, Derek, is this going to work? Is this going to work? Is this going to work? He said, why don't you just do that for us? And I said, okay.
Okay.
And so,
when, where?
And so I said, okay. And so I started my IT firm back up that I'd had years ago, and that is Ameritech Computer Consultants, and it's a division of Ameritech Data Solutions. And so now then we have a full service IT and security group that we primarily support test and balance firms, because we know what they have to deal with. We know their ins and outs. We are a Microsoft Office shop.
Sure.
So we provide Microsoft Office products. So your Word, your Excel, your Outlook, those products there. We provide security monitoring, your Bitdefenders, antivirus,
So
stuff
with
like
that in mind, do you have some quick advice for other businesses out there, what not to do? What's your top, couple of list of things of you're going to get in trouble if you do this?
Yeah,
From a protection standpoint.
I can give you the number one thing. So The number one action that people do that will get them in trouble is to click on attachments and emails from people that they're not familiar with.
Yeah.
So you'll get an email in that says your invoice is attached, and all it is an attachment that says invoice. And so people will just say, oh, it's an invoice. Let me double click on that. And as soon as you double click on it, it's too late.
It's too late.
You don't have any recourse once you've double clicked on it. So the goal is to take and provide education and software to take and monitor those things up front to be able to take and help protect you. Now, test and balance firms are potentially susceptible to this information because every one of you have an actual estimating department, and you get requests for bids all the time.
Unsolicited information.
Unsolicited information. And a lot of times you're like, I want to click on this because it looks, reasonable, whatever, when it's made up. I mean, it's fake. And the problem that you're going to have now is that with AI is so incredibly good at being able to create stuff. So I have a customer, we're going to call him Zach Duncan. And I work with him all the time. I got an email the other day from Zach Duncan.
Yep. Close, but not close enough.
Not close enough.
Yeah.
And it was like, hey, I need you to click on this. And I'm like, no. I'm not doing it. So the first thing I did was called and spoke to him and said, hey, I just got this email in. Did you send this? And he's like, nope, didn't do that.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, I just wanted to make sure. And so that 30 seconds to pick up that phone call to verify that that is really from that person. And I have another IT firm, and we have a code word that we use, and you have to have that code word in the email, and there's obviously position and stuff like that. So if it's not in there, then I know that it's a scam, and so I won't.
No, as you've said there, once you get your computer system affected, then your cloud is infected, and so we have all those services at my business there. And aside from that, we take a terabyte drive and back it up in his home in my sock drawer. So as a worst case scenario, we at least have a starting point, and if we have that, because eventually, as you said, sooner or later you're going to have a problem.
You are.
And
it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
It's a matter of time to do something like that. So we're at the point now, we have some wrap-up questions there.
Okay.
So if you could go back in time to your former self when you started this business in the IT world there, what would you tell yourself now? What did you learn? What would you do differently?
Wow. Okay. Let me start out by telling you what my uncle told me. So best advice that I ever got. He was in business for himself or whatever. And so my uncle said that the answer to every question is yes. And I said,
yes.
Huh? And he said, yes. He said, if a customer asks you if you can take and actually, build a box out of Jell-O or whatever, the answer is yes. You may not be able to do it, but you can hire someone else
to do it. Okay.
And so you always want to make sure that your customer is satisfied and you provide everything you can. So with that being said, my staff is routinely are like, don't ask Derek because he's going to say yes and it's going to be an absolute nightmare. So I probably would take and be a little more focused on some of the things that we do instead of being so broad, because we do so much here for all of our different customers. I probably would take and streamline that down a little bit. The other thing, and this is more of a joke than it is an actual reality, is I probably wouldn't hire employees. And you probably understand that.
Yeah, I understand that.
But employees are necessary in order to take and be able to provide the quality of service.
You can't do everything yourself.
Right. And I am a control freak, and people are always shocked when I can't believe you said that. I know that I'm a control freak, just like I know that I'm fat. Yeah. I mean, I own a mirror. Yeah. And so
I own a mirror.
And so I probably would, I probably would take and try to learn to delegate more.
Yeah.
I am, at a point in time now, I had a customer of mine who gave me one of the best advice recently, and he said, delegate. He said, my life changed when I learned to delegate.
I think
and
so.
I am learning to delegate. As a matter of fact, I had an employee ask me something yesterday, and I said, ask the accountant. Now, I could have done it, but it was an accounting function, and so I was directing them ask the accountant, because that's what I pay them for.
That's what you paid them for, and the same thing with me. I finally started to delegate things, and in fact, when I delegated things, employees came back to me and say, "Are you dying?"
Right.
And they didn't understand because I never would delegate.
Right.
And
absolutely.
now that I'm delegating, I have the time to visit with you.
Right.
I'm out of the office, and we're talking about something that's not related to what I do every day.
Correct. Me too.
And it's actually, I've learned to have a little bit of refreshment of doing something different
Right.
In our business.
But I want to really answer the question that you asked.
Yeah.
The true answer to the question is I wouldn't do anything different.
Really?
And the reason being is because I'm happy with where I'm at right now. I'm happy with the staff that I have. I am happy with the products that we have provided. And all of my decisions, good, bad, or indifferent, have put me in this seat next to you today. And I'm proud to be, here with you.
Well, thank you.
And you, and chosen to take be interviewed or whatever. And if I'd have made any decision different, then I may not be in this chair today. And so,
Well, I'd like to say that just have a delightful opportunity for knowing Derek for a while. And because we frequent the same type of conferences more so. We've shared the same podiums at conferences. And we both attempted to try to make engineers laugh, which is close to impossible. We keep trying. But one attribute that you do have that I have noticed, and one of the reasons we're chatting now, is you have this personal magnetism. And people just want to hear your story. And for one example of this, a few years back, we attended the same conference. I think it was in the Panhandle. And we both got to the Pensacola airport early.
Right.
And it was very small airports, like 10 terminals. And as we got to the airport there, I was traveling with my wife, Patty. Your gate was the gate number 1, and Patty and I were in gate number 10. So we walked down the aisle and sat down number 10 and read the newspaper. We were early for the flight. And you, Mr. Ants in the Pants, would be walking up and down this aisle, back and forth, to the point where every 5 minutes I'd look up, there you are. It was like repetitive. And all of a sudden, you weren't there. And I became anxious that you weren't there. Your flight had not come in, and I made an excuse to my wife that I had to go to the restroom. So I walked up towards Terminal 1 to go to the bathroom, and Derek is sitting in the chair with a dozen or so people on the floor in front of him in awe about the story he's telling them. It was like the Pied Piper. And so the one thing I give back to Derek is, and I didn't hear exactly what he said, so he could be selling some timeshare property for all I know. But aside from that, people had the desire to hear his story, and he took fulfillment out of telling that story. So he has the type of personality that he just loves to help people. And people love to sit down and talk to them. Some people want to sit in his lap and give their shopping Christmas list to Santa Claus, and he gets joked about that all the time. But he's a good spirit, and I've never seen you mad. I haven't seen you all the time, but I haven't seen you mad. And we'll go to a conference together, and I'll have an exhibit set up, and he'll come over and ask me, do I need some help setting up my exhibit? So he's just that kind of person. So I wish that I had the personal magnetism that you have, and I think that's the key to your success in your career, because your career is all about people.
It is.
It's all about people, and then you have a certain skill set. In this case, there's some IT skills to solve this specific problem. And so that brings up some other things. What's in the future for Derek? What do you want to do moving forward here? What's your quest?
Well, people ask me all the time, say, what are you going to do? What are we going to do when you retire? Because most people equate Ameritech with Derek.
They do.
And
our insurance too.
And our insurance. They are so concerned that I'm going to retire, and they're not going to take and have the level of service or the level of interest in them that I have. And I tell people all the time, when you run a business, you can't retire. You just can't. You can work less and you can try to avoid the office as much as possible, but you can't retire. So I really see no reason why I won't be available. I mean, until I'm probably 70, or if I pass away sooner than that, of course.
You can stop working when you pass away.
I can stop working when I pass away. That'll be I'm going to put on well, I'm not going to have a tombstone, but if I had a tombstone, it would say retired versus dead. But yeah, so, I intend to work less. I intend to come into the office less or whatever, but I'm going to always be there to be able to take in, provide, I'm the chief technical officer. So to provide those ideas, my staff is forever going, because I'll say, hey, I got an idea. And they're like, oh God, here it comes.
Here it comes.
And so I'm like, I think it'd be great if, and they're like, okay, that's horrible.
What about your contributions now to your community? What are you doing? You have a great zeal for supporting your community.
Yeah. So I'm a giver, and I want people to succeed. And so I'm forever trying to take and help people out in some form, fashion, or the other. My life does not revolve around money. Most people do. I think money is, it causes people to do bad things, and the greed for money also causes that. So I like being able to help people in certain situations. I was in the grocery line the other day, and the lady in front of me, she was an elderly black lady, and she was getting groceries or whatever, and she had asked the lady to take and give her a total as she was getting stuff out of the cart. And she had her money there, and so they would do it, and she'd say, okay, that's, $12. Okay, that's da-da-da-da-da. And she got down, and there were like, I don't know, 3 or 4 items still left in her cart. And she put an item across the scanner, and she said, that's going to be something. It was $40 maybe or whatever. And she said, okay, we'll take that off. And I said, nope. Put all that stuff through the scanner because I'm going to pay for it.
Yep.
And so she went ahead and she put all the stuff through there, and she paid, and I paid for it because I believe that God puts me where he wants me to be when he wants me to be there.
How about that?
And so I do stuff like that routinely. I was in Walmart one time, and there was this young couple, and they had fled a bad situation, in one of the northwestern states or whatever, and they had landed in Wilson, North Carolina, of all places. And at that time, I was helping a customer, and I had moved my camper to a local campground there to be able to help. And so I was in behind them in Walmart, and they were buying, a tent and, some basic camping supplies or whatever, because they had just jumped in the car and just left and ended up here in Wilson, North Carolina. And they were going to stay at the campground, and they were going to set up a tent and stuff like that or whatever. And after hearing their stories, I'm like, let me buy that for you. Let me be the person that gives you that one thing to help you get started again. So for me, helping people and seeing people in need and making sure that people get what they need is what I do. Like, I got a couple now that they're in a situation, they're trying to start up a bakery, and they are currently trying to figure out, how am I going to take and pay rent, and how I'm going to start this bakery and stuff like that. Well, I have a warehouse, and then I have a vacant space. And so I'm going to invest in doing an actual quote unquote break room, which happens to be commercial in nature. And I'm going to rent it to them and let them take in and start up their bakery business. And because, it's their passion. And if you saw some of the work, you're like, this is what you're meant to do.
Yeah.
And I think God wants me to take and give them help to be able to take and get started. And I suspect they'll be very successful.
And that's something
that
kind of makes you glow inside. So aside from the providing to the community it makes you personally feel better.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
that's great. And all about flow meters. Can you imagine that? The world of people that we meet through our in and out of life, traveling around the country, and our businesses and our practices, our religions and our community affairs, and all things like that is a very interesting circle of people.
It is.
And we've had. I travel a lot. I travel a lot with my wife Patty around the country, and we meet the most beautiful people. And a little bit about flow meters, a lot about life.
Right.
And life is first, and test and balance was a narrow world, and flow meters is a narrow world. But when we all come together, we're all people.
That's right.
And we all have things to make a contribution. And Derek, I know you're a very busy guy, traveling all over the place, taking care of people, running businesses. You can hear some banging above us. There's a gymnasium above us, taking care of everybody in the business there. Yeah. It's a rewarding experience for us to be here. In fact, just to show him, we went out to breakfast this morning, and the little mom and pop place we had breakfast, we've never been there before. I don't know that he'd been there before. The first thing to do is they come in and give him a hug. I said, why are they hugging him and not me? So there you go. There's a reception of life. So, Derek, thank you very much for giving us some time today.
Yes, absolutely.
We look forward to hearing for your future adventures. And then someday, maybe Patty and I will get invited for breakfast on Sunday.
Well, absolutely. I mean, there's always food in the refrigerator. You're more than welcome to come at any time. Now, I will say I am a little disappointed in the fact that you wouldn't try my liver mush this morning. It was quite delicious.
We're working on it. We're working on it.
You're working your way up.
We're working our way on it there. Thank you for the time this morning.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Yeah.